So, the satsang today, there's a particular subject that's come up over and over again, an aspect of awakening that's come up many times this week, and actually many times today, in conversations. So, it is apparently what wants to be explored in this time that we have together here. And it's something that was particularly challenging for me. In fact, I say that every satsang. I really, really struggled with this challenge, this area of awakening, but it's largely misunderstood. And so I want to see if we can bring some light to it together to really understand what happens. And it's been called many things, but it's famously known as the dark night of the soul. Um, a crisis, a mini meltdown. I'm sure we have all had those times. Maybe you're having one right now where everything in your life that you thought was true just seems to be, and I'm not talking so much about the formlessness and the form, the spiritual seeing that can be combined as well with this kind of life turning upside down in a way that we really did not expect. And perhaps we were very, very sure that life was going to go a certain way. This was going to be the way it is. This is what I'm sure of. And then life surprises us, sometimes delightfully, but sometimes it's not so delightful. In fact, quite the opposite. We might be feeling very lost, very ungrounded, very unsure of why this is happening or even for what reason and how to navigate it, how to work with it. And usually these are times of a great deal of negative emotion coming to the surface. And surprisingly for me, there were never more of these than after I'd started to see who I really, really was and am. My thought process went that when I wake up to see who I really am, then these dark nights will be over. But actually, they started to happen more frequently during this process of um, moving into living as what I'd seen myself to be. And maybe you experienced that yourself in your own life, that perhaps there are more of these moments or days or weeks where we just feel completely bereft of any direction, any sense of purpose, any understanding, everything that we think we have seen in our progress, in our process, in our journey to awakening suddenly seems completely unavailable, completely absent from inside of us. And it's like being a beginner again, but not in the wonderful spiritual way. It's like I've lost all access to all resources in that moment. And I can't even remember what I have forgotten or lost in that moment. Have you ever had those moments? Well, for me, they were they were years at first. And truth be told, this was what my depression was when I first uh, was dragged to the pathway, kicking and screaming. And it went on for years, probably 5 years at least. The second time, it was another year, and I was so sure that I was uh, becoming depressed again. And only later realized it was actually one of these dark nights of the soul. And it's about that time I started reading some St. John of the Cross, his work on the Dark Night. I heard this term somewhere, I can't remember where now, Dark Night of the Soul. And somehow it made it sound spiritual, like there was reason behind it. It gave me something to hold on to in those moments. So I'd like to try to share my understanding of how these dark nights have changed for me and how they happen now and how I eventually learned to navigate them. And in fact, even to come to a point where I would actually want them to happen. I remember reading once that St. John would pray for these dark nights to occur in his life. And I thought, how crazy is that? Who would even actually ask for something like this? But surprisingly, I came to that point where I could see it was the most important thing that could happen. And actually, rather than being a failure that my mind had said it was the greatest success. The sign of spiritual success would be this kind of thing happening to us. And the dark night, it really refers to, the term is apt in many ways. If you've ever been awake at night time when everyone else is asleep and you're tired and you just want to sleep, doesn't it seem like the longest night of your entire existence? And it seems very, very dark in those moments. You can't see anything. It feels like everything that you knew to be true before the sun went down has suddenly vanished and is missing. And for most of us, when these things happen, we fight. We fight our way through them. We spend the whole time resisting the process. And I really want to look at why that is. Why do we resist this process that is so transformational that every saint and sage and mystic would actually come to a point where they would pray for them to happen, invite them, welcome them, want them, like them. Why do we resist these moments? And I said this that I'm going to say 100 million ways already, and in 100 different satsangs at least. I try to mention it at least once every single event that we do, every retreat. But I want to really just put it in its own satsang here so that we can refer back to it perhaps when it's needed. That is that what's happening to us feels like a failure. Suddenly we're flooded with thoughts, illusions, contractions in the body. Our outside world may have been completely turned upside down. Everything that we thought we were sure of might be disappearing. No ground under our feet to stand on, nothing firm or solid, no reference point, both inside and outside. Increasingly, it's crumbling. Is this a terrible thing that's happening? Well, of course, our mind will say it is. Our mind will say that this is obvious evidence of our failure to progress along the path. Obvious, mind says. It's obvious. But if we really want to live as this peace, this truth, we really have to question even these most convincing of stories. That I know that what's happening to me right now is failure, absolute failure to progress along the path. What if that isn't what's happening? What if the dark night is the most auspicious thing that could happen to you? And in fact, doesn't need to last for any more than a few hours or minutes or seconds if we don't fight it. How do we stop fighting it? Well, firstly, to understand what it is. As an apparent separate being, we have all learned ways of suppressing emotions, rejecting our thoughts about ourselves, rejecting who we think we are, compartmentalizing everything that we can't deal with in this pocket here, another one in this pocket here. We have many skilled ways of avoiding looking at what we need to look at. And it costs us. It costs us an awful lot. It costs us infinite peace, well-being, vitality, joy, a deep sense of intimacy with what is, a rich and profound love with all that exists. So can we, as we were talking about in the previous satsang, that awakening is going to cost us everything. What if you gladly pay this price? I'm willing to not be so sure that something is going wrong here, that this is absolute abject failure, that I've done something wrong, that I am wrong, that I've screwed up my awakening, and that this that's happening to me now, this falling apart, is something that's going very wrong. Why is it happening then? Well, it's happening because as we see clearer and clearer who we are. And that's even if we only know it mentally, if we haven't had a direct experience yet, the formless infinite consciousness, still this, what I'm going to say is true. Even to know, even intellectually only, that you're not a person, that you don't have a life, that you are existence itself, that you're infinite, formless, unbound, unlimited presence, that you are the divinity itself appearing as a human being, that you're not at all who you thought you were. One of the benefits of realizing that, however much we've realized it, is that we cannot suppress anything anymore. Now, that may sound like a good thing until you can't stop crying when you have to go to work or something like that, right? You've got to go to work and you can't stop sobbing, or the kids need something, or the phone's ringing, or whatever's happening, and you're just losing it. You're losing it, right? What do you do in that moment? Well, ultimately, there's nothing you can do in that moment, but if you can give yourself to it, whatever that means for you, with the willingness to question this story that this is your awakening failing, and maybe a willingness to see that this is your awakening succeeding in the most profound way, here is clear evidence that you're already living as the infinite self, that which cannot resist, suppress, project, and all of those things. That which can only be with what is, even to be with a dislike of what is. That which is big enough and strong enough and compassionate enough and loving enough to allow sadness, grief, shame, anger, regret, despair, apathy, judgment, all of it, fear, frustration, anything that you could have possibly ever suppressed. What if this is a sign that your identity has shifted so much already to living as the infinite self, but you didn't notice until you couldn't suppress an emotion anymore? How does that change how you're being in that moment? How does that change how you're being with this situation? Can you then recognize that this is something auspicious? Auspicious doesn't necessarily feel good in that moment. Some of the most auspicious moments of my entire life have felt the worst, in fact. And only because I was fighting them, I hadn't realized that this dark night is a gift. It is everything that no longer fits inside you rising to the surface. Every story, every emotion, every suppression, every judgment, everything. And just like when the rain clouds come and they're dark clouds, they pass in front of the sun temporarily, you can't see the light anymore, but you know it's there. You seem to be completely cut off from it. What if you can't remember what to do in that moment because there is nothing to do except fall apart? Can you give yourself to that a little bit more? And of course, we're talking about these times here, these periods where it's really prevalent, where we're really noticing some structure falling away inside and outside. But this is really advice for every day as the self, the infinite self. It's been a long time since I had the capacity to suppress an emotion, and at the time I thought that would be terrible because of the intensity with which some of them came and how much they surprised me, and I wasn't expecting it. As a separate being, you know that one of these moments is coming because you can feel it. Because you're squashing it and you're saying, no, 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 not now, not now, later, later. When it's the infinite self, there's just peace and quietness, and suddenly this explosion of whatever this explosion is. So can you go into it? Can you say yes to it, even though you don't like it? Understanding that on some level, All the sages are dancing because you're finally exploding with this emotion. You finally can't keep it in. Everyone in all the realms is celebrating because finally you don't have the energy left to hold together a separate sense of self in that moment. Finally, you're living authentically, being whatever you are in that moment. If that's angry, that's angry. If that's despairing, it's despairing. And the more that you can go into this, agree to this, give your consent to this, the more peace you're also going to feel at the same time. You know, I had one of these moments where my life was falling apart and it fell apart spectacularly, not just slightly. I mean, if you've had those moments yourself, where my mind was struck silent because there was nothing it could possibly say in that moment that would have any um, importance to what was actually occurring. Everything that was happening was going this way, and my mind was so sure it was going to go this way. In that moment, I found inside of me this capacity to let it happen, not to like it. There was extreme like, and there was wailing and sobbing. Don't think for a moment it was pretty. There was actually shouting. There was a lot of shouting. But I found something inside that was able to just let it happen. And that is the real me. This is what's happening for you when you have these moments. And they don't look spiritual. They don't look pretty. They don't look like we think they will, these moments where great change is happening. But they are spiritual. There's a big difference I found out between being a good spiritual person and being awakened. Am I willing to cry in the supermarket? I found out yes, actually. The answer to that question was yes. Am I willing to cry in front of people I've never seen before? Yes. Of course, something inside my head was shouting, no, no, don't do this. So why is this happening? What if you're wrong about the reason why it's happening? What if that willingness to be wrong shortened it from months or years to minutes? What if it could just erupt like a volcano and be done? Inside, afterwards, there's a freshness, a cleanness, a new frequency, a new peace. Much more capacity to recognize the silence that you are. The clouds clear, and the sun is so bright that it's blinding for a moment, right? Just for a moment. Whoa, that's intense peace. And I see this over and over again that we aren't recognizing what's happening. We aren't recognizing the gift that's happening to us. We're awake enough to allow everything that needs to leave to leave. Firstly, for our own mental health, but also our physical health. Certainly our emotional health. Certainly much kinder for those people around us too, usually. If you've ever struggled with anger and things like that. So if you can't get to this knowing in that moment when you most need it, that this is a spiritual success, write it on a piece of paper and keep it where you can find it in terms of spiritual crisis. I used to have my spiritual SOS kit, emergency. And it was this piece of paper that said, this is actually success happening. And it was my favorite blanket. It was all always together in my bedroom where I knew where to get it. And there was some of my favorite crystals that I used to love to sit with, and a photo of Ramana and some other things. And I would just sit there, and all I could say sometimes was, "This is success happening," while I was sobbing. The last dark night of the soul I had happened last week, and it took 10 seconds. There was this moment of extreme doubt, like, what am I doing? Like, what is all this? Am I doing the right thing? And there was no even any negative emotion behind it. It was 10 seconds. It just like, an out. Like, well, if you've ever shaken a bottle of fizzy pop or soda, let's call it, and then taken the top off, just like that. 10 seconds from 5 years, the first time it happened. Lots of therapy, antidepressants, and a whole lot of trying to get my life back together to 10 seconds. What was the difference in that? Simply to understand why it was happening and what it meant, and to challenge this story that I'm doing this wrong, I'm going backwards. Right now, if you're listening to this and you're feeling some deep understanding and some healing and some recognition happening, that's great. What's going to happen when satsang is finished and you have to go about your day? Or maybe some of you are going to bed and you wake up the next day. What's going to happen then? Are you going to remember this? Are you going to write it down? Or stick it as a note in your phone? Somewhere you know your SOS kit, your emergency, your lifeboat. It's important, right? This is success. And it doesn't have to last a long time or even be terrible. Actually, when we stop suppressing it, it doesn't even have to be an emotion or a physical event in our life. It could just be the thought energy. If we're suppressing it, it will come out as lots of emotions. If we're really suppressing it, it will come out as physical situation too. And these things are so auspicious that they're like a reset, restore to factory settings, the body and mind, right? Or an upgrade or an up-leveling, an allowing of this divine love that we are to actually flow even more unimpeded through the body and mind. It's only the divine love that you really are that could actually handle this falling apart. The ego couldn't handle it, right? It's not its fault, but it can't handle it. All it's been able to do is avoid looking at this stuff. Maybe bite-sized pieces of it in the therapy that we've had, the counseling that we've had, the moments of tears and all of that. So if your life is falling apart, can you accept that it is something going really right? The first thing that's going to happen for most of us after a clear seeing is that life is going to begin to rearrange itself to the way that it wants to be, where everyone is happier, freer. It won't look like that at first. It will look like it's falling apart. I've had many such moments, and I'm sure that you have. So, emergency toolkit, a piece of paper that says, this is success happening. This is because I'm already awake. This is because I'm so awake I can't suppress anything. Whichever one of those works for you, or all of them. And just saying yes to it inside yourself, whatever that means, whatever that means. And don't give yourself an absolute, I have to totally, totally be with this willingly till it's finished. Maybe you meet it for half an hour willingly and then you resist it the rest of the time. That's okay too, right? In that half an hour, you've taken days and days and days off of this process. It's not that it has to last for a certain amount of linear time. And it's a dark night for most of us usually because there's just enough left of our egoic sense of self in that moment to really freak out. Not enough of it left to actually try to do something or remember something, but enough to freak out about what's going on. You know, looking back, I'm sure this would be the case that everything that's happened to us that we did not want to happen has eventually led to some blessing, some breakthrough. And none of us would be sat here in this satsang without it. None of us. None of these bodies. So if you really take this to heart, you can shortcut this process. And I'm not saying you have to go around looking for stuff that you're suppressing, but just when it comes, can you recognize it's coming because your awakening is succeeding? Can you recognize that it's happening because the formlessness that you are can't suppress? It has no hands to push something down. It can't accept or reject, even. I'm only asking you to say yes, to give the little egoic fragment something to do in that moment, something to hold on to. And a miracle is the end of the beginning of a dark night. They're one and the same thing. One end of it looks like a dark night, the end of it looks like a miracle, if you will allow that process to go all the way through. The trouble is that the mind, the ego, takes a little section of it, a little section of the time frame, and says, this is disaster. And it doesn't wait to see. A friend of mine, someone I used to know very well, said to me many times, everything is always all right in the end. And if it's not all right, it's not the end. And at first I thought, what a stupid saying. But actually, life has really played that out, right? If we're here for awakening, if this life is for awakening, which it really, really is, and maybe the understanding is dawning that it's already too late for you to not wake up. It's already too late. There's no if. There's no if it happens for you. It's already in progress, deeply, deeply in progress. There is no way you'd be drawn to such a very direct teaching as this if it wasn't. Or if there was anything inside you that wanted to resist anymore. Not the ego, of course, it is resistance, but we love it for that because it's totally being what it is. The ego is 100% being what it is. It is a resistance mechanism, and it does that so perfectly. And we love it for it. After we realize we're not it, of course. If you're ever going to be wrong about anything in your life, this is the greatest thing to be wrong about. Firstly, that you're not a separate self. And then secondly, why anything is coming up in your life. What if every thought and judgment, every self-blame, every criticism, every doubt is coming up because it no longer fits inside you? It needs to be seen in the light of who you are. It needs to be loved. Loved and seen, they're the same thing. Real love would not try to change anything. It would completely allow it to exist for as long as it wanted to exist. And in the intensity and the immensity of that love, it only exists for a short time, whatever we don't want to experience. Nothing can withstand the full gaze of your divine love. Nothing. Nothing at all. No object has to be transformed when you look at it from who you really are. And that's what's happening when we're having these moments, whether we realize it or not. There is no greater success on the path than something like this. Of course, there are the amazing moments too. The aha moments, the sweet revelations, the moments when the silence just seems to be so loud that you can't hear anything else, not even the mind. And those are amazing, of course, and nice, and to be celebrated. But if the sages and saints and the mystics would pray for these moments, doesn't that tell us something? They would ask for them even, because they are so transformational. Wouldn't you rather have 1 or 2 days of just all of this stuff coming to the surface, or 1 or 2 hours? The months and months and months of years of experiencing this same old emotion coming to the surface, rejecting it, It's seemingly going away, it comes back again, you push it down again. This is how we've survived as a separate being, apparently, all this time. And if you really say yes to it, it can be seconds.